Morning.
I have to say, it is just a delight to look out at an audience, a sold-out crowd of Apprenticeship, to see people in the overflow room outside. I want to thank Crystal for those introductions, and I want to thank Crystal and the entire conference planning team for pulling this together. If you've been around this issue, which most of us have for some time, you know that its time has come, and it is, as I said, wonderful to see and feel the momentum in the room today. There's so much at stake here for us as a country, and so much at stake for all of us as individuals and communities. At the Siemens Foundation, we are all about STEM. And as many of you know, too often people forget that STEM jobs include more than 4-year degrees. They include 2-year degrees, and apprenticeships is what they are all about. Those jobs, which are often referred to as middle skill jobs or technical jobs or skilled jobs, are family and community sustaining, and they are launching pads into a lifelong career into STEM industries that are full of possibilities and opportunity. They are, in fact, a key component of the social compact we have with one another in the United States here about opportunity, about working hard, and about being able to care for ourselves, our families, and our communities. These jobs also happen to be the lifeblood of every STEM business. They keep the digital factory of the 21st century online. They support cybersecurity of small, medium, and large-size enterprises. They protect life in hospitals and other medical facilities, and they source energy for the U.S. from oil and gas and from wind and other renewable energies. Unfortunately, far too many young adults in the U.S. are not poised to take on these careers, leaving them behind in the race to economic sufficiency. Over 5 million are disconnected from school and work, leaving them afloat in an impatient labor market. And youth unemployment rates, particularly for minority populations, are unacceptably high in this country, choking off early access to the workforce that helps so many of us develop networks and skills and positive work history that is needed for future jobs. At the Siemens Foundation, we are working to close this opportunity gap, like so many of you in the room, for young adults in the U.S. and strengthen the talent pipeline for the U.S. STEM employers through our STEM Middle Skill Initiative. Apprenticeships, as everyone in this room now knows, have a proven track record in the U.S. and are among our international economic peers. They are unquestionably the gold standard for integrating academic learning, real-world skills, and specific knowledge needed for a job and for a business. Siemens understands that value, as many of you heard yesterday and hopefully have known before, firsthand with more than 10,000 apprenticeships in Germany each year. And so in the U.S., Siemens is expanding its apprenticeships to additional sites and increasing the number of apprentices at local facilities like the Charlotte, North Carolina Energy Hub, which is represented here today as well. At the Siemens Foundation, we've partnered with the U.S. Department of Labor and the National Governors Association to help American Apprenticeship Initiative grantees achieve their goals of scaling apprenticeships in the U.S. and building the critical public-private ecosystems that make them work. We have partnered with J.P. Morgan Chase and NGA to take several governors and their delegations abroad to Germany and Switzerland to see firsthand how their apprenticeship systems are part of their secret sauce for low unemployment and developing the skilled talent their employers need. I still have 5 pounds to work off from that cheese and beer. Others I've seen seem to have done better than I have. And we are very proud to support this landmark conference, Apprenticeship Forward. So I'm proud to be joined today by Governor Malloy, as Crystal noted, a champion for workforce development in his home state of Connecticut. He is particularly honed in on apprenticeships as one way to accomplish his goal of building a 21st century workforce in Connecticut. Governor, it is wonderful to have you here with us this morning. Thank you for being here. In your state, to start out, in your state you have set out a vision for a 21st century workforce, and at the heart of that, one of the key components is apprenticeships. Would you just begin by laying out that vision for us and talking about the role of those apprenticeships in that?
Well, I think first it's important to understand that Connecticut is a geographically small state with a mid-sized state population of about 3.5 million people. The reality is that over the last 50 years, the states in the Northeast have lost a lot of low value added manufacturing. But where we are competitive in Connecticut and Western Massachusetts and other parts of New England and the Northeast is in high value added manufacturing. So most people here wouldn't understand or wouldn't know necessarily that Connecticut is one of the top 3 most concentrated states in aerospace. But we have a problem, and the problem is that a combination of factors in our society have led us to not value those jobs to the extent that we should have been valuing those jobs. And that is cultural and societal, and it's a long-term issue that you don't turn around overnight. But understand that high value added manufacturing jobs are producing salaries of $65,000 to $130,000. You know, if you go into a Pratt & Whitney line and you're going to see somebody using a $2 million machine cutting a $100,000 piece of steel. You know, these are different kinds of jobs, and I think that society's norms and our education norms didn't adjust to what the need was. And then finally, the people who filled those jobs for the last generation, and quite frankly, that term should be defined as generation and a half, they received their on-the-job training, and in many cases received training in apprenticeship or internship programs as they existed in the 60s and 70s before they were disassembled in the 80s and 90s. But they're all retiring.
Yeah.
And so we have this, I think, national problem. We certainly had it in Connecticut when I became governor 7 years ago, of people leaving work faster than their qualified replacements were becoming available, even in some early programs that had been restarted by companies. So as I sit here today, our work with the federal government, our work with our manufacturers, our work with our community colleges has really led to an explosion of apprenticeship and internship programs in the state. On the apprenticeship side, we have 1,600 companies that are participating in partially state, partially federal, and partially privately funded apprenticeship programs. Some of those are old line in the sense that they're existing labor training programs by labor unions, but the growth has all been on the private sector side in cooperation with state and federal government. 1,600 companies, 6,000 folks in apprenticeship programs, new programs starting every day. I just saw a friend from the Hartford, not the city, but the insurance company. And I'll be out on their campus in a couple of weeks where they'll start a new apprenticeship program for 12, and that will be matched in a Phoenix location, I believe, for another 12. So we're talking about 24 apprenticeship opportunities in one company coming about on one day in May. So these are significant amounts of progress. I think what you're going to ask me next, and so I'll just go into it. What the heck? Is a little bit deeper dive about how did we get into this mess? And I think that you know, it really was a cultural shift. I think America thought that manufacturing would not exist as we were witnessing it taking place in our country for much longer. And so we convinced ourselves that everything would be white collar, everything would require a college degree, and by the way, if you didn't pursue that, you were a bit of a failure. And of course, that's just not the case as I've laid out in the incomes and benefits that people can receive, but it could have been, and it might still be, a self-fulfilling prophecy if we don't address this issue forthrightly, not just in our educational institutions, not just in our great companies, but as a societal norm, what we expect. And are we willing to recognize that different people need to do different things?
Yeah. Yeah, rebranding these jobs is absolutely critical here for all of us in the room to make sure that we're able to do this. You've talked a little bit about the needs for us as a society and business community, but I want to ask you to drill down a little bit deeper into making the appeal to employers and to educators on why apprentices. What are sort of the top few things that you talk to them about in order to get them involved and up and moving?
Well, you know, again, I understand that there's a difference between internships, which we tend to think of more white collar than apprenticeships, which we think that, if we use the old terms, think of as blue collar. But first and foremost, if you're the person if you're the company that introduces someone to a line of work, they're far more likely to work for you when the program's done. So this is in your best interest. Number two, if you're the only company that's doing that and you lose that person, you got to start all over. So this has to be a group effort. And that's why I think this 1,600 companies in Connecticut participating is so very significant, because what you're ultimately doing is creating that environment which you've referenced where everybody's doing it, that it becomes the norm. Number three, what I would say is that if we don't do this together, we lose tens of thousands of opportunities through our pre-K through 12 educational system, and then quite frankly through other educational systems for older individuals, simply because we ignored their prospects, simply because we ignored the need of our communities. And that in and of itself, I think, has proven to be entirely destructive with respect to some of the manufacturing that we should have been keeping in this country already. We've lost some of that because we didn't have the workforce prepared. Now, can we onshore that? I think we can, and I think Connecticut's a good example. If you look at foreign investment in Connecticut companies in aerospace and in bioscience, it is in part in recognition that we're doing a better job preparing that workforce.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't known you long. We just met today. You're a positive person, but it's a rainy day, and I want to ask you a little bit about barriers that are out there, both perceived and actual barriers.
I can't think of a better place to talk about barriers than Washington.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But we all in the room feel the momentum, and we're hearing it from your state. Absolutely. And yet we have a long way to go before this is woven into the fabric of our country and our states. Talk to us a little bit about what those barriers are, particularly for employers and for educators as you go out there, and how you address those and make sure that people understand the full case for apprenticeship.
There's a lot in that question, and I'm going to try to divide it. I talked a little bit about the industry's response, and I'll get back to that. But I'm using this term culturally. We have to redirect ourselves culturally. We have to understand. We have to be willing to agree that our assumptions about manufacturing were wrong. That those aren't bad jobs; they're great jobs. That they're not all leaving the country; they're going to stay in the country, and we have the opportunity to reshore them. If we can get our broader society to accept that, down to the Chamber of Commerce side, and particularly all the way down through the educative processes that we have in our localities, in our states, and in our nation, then we can change this in a massive way. And when I talk about onshoring or reshoring of these jobs, I'm not talking about a handful of jobs. We're talking about a lot of jobs. If you're building airplanes in the United States, you want all those parts to be made relatively close to where you're building them. If you're building a submarine, and we build half the submarines that the Navy has, and but General Dynamics in Connecticut is known by the better name electric boat. Submarines. And we're building those in our state. They have a need over the next few years for 9,000 to 11,000 new employees. And this is a dire need. And in fact, a lot of the work that we're doing in manufacturing is to address that. But here, let me drill down. We need to go to first grade teachers and second grade teachers and all the way through 12th grade teachers, and we need to have them understand that despite what they pursued for themselves, they need to help their students pursue on a broader basis the opportunities that are going to be existent in our country for jobs, good jobs, high-paying jobs, important jobs, satisfying jobs. And then we have to go all the way through our adult educative processes, particularly at community colleges. I have a pet peeve about community colleges, and I'll share this with you. I personally don't think any program should be offered at community college that we don't give college credit for. If it is important enough to have a program on a community college campus, it is important enough to recognize that as we recognize all other academic and training achievement. And if we do nothing else than that, we will have moved the ball significantly forward. And when we do that, more opportunities for apprenticeships will in fact present themselves from the industry to the community colleges, because they're saying there's value there. And until we get to that point in community colleges and all of our other private and public universities, we're not going to make the kind of mindset change, cultural change that I think we have to make.
Yep, agreed. A lot of support in the room for that. I want to shift into some specifics around your Department of Labor American Apprenticeship grant, which is focused on expanding apprenticeships into what I will call non-traditional industries like healthcare, business services, and IT, at least non-traditional from the standpoint of apprenticeships. So if you would tell us a little bit about what's driving that focus to other industries in your state, those industries in particular, and again, what the barriers you've seen and what federal tools would help your state address those barriers.
Well, let's start with the federal tools. We have been successful in receiving grants, I think just about every time that we've applied for them on a competitive basis, because quite frankly, we're doing the things we say we're going to do. And they are, in fact, producing folks who are becoming almost instantaneously employed. Let me tell you a little story about why this has gotten such a head start in Connecticut. When I became governor, I'm now in my 7th year, we had 12 community colleges. We had 1 community college with an advanced manufacturing program. We now have 7 of our community colleges out of 12 with advanced manufacturing programs. And the private colleges have gotten into the business as well. So now there's a recognition that you can place 98 to 100% of people completing those programs into high-paying jobs. Wow, maybe that would work in other areas. And so then if you look at other strengths that Connecticut have beyond precision manufacturing or high-valued manufacturing, the insurance industry, for instance, and that's why I referenced the Hartford, the company, they have real needs. And this time where every customer service relationship or every review of plan relationship is going to be done in South Dakota, those days are over. Those jobs are, people want to have those jobs closer to where the person who's being served or the policy is being written or underwritten or understood. So this is going to be a very large move based on our success in advanced manufacturing into other industries. And those industries also understand this, that we're not training the people properly for their needs. Everything I just said about advanced manufacturing is true in that industry in many of the same ways. We are too narrow-minded about what we consider the right thing for other people's children. And what the right thing for other people's children is to give them as many options as possible and stop taking them off the table. And so we're working with industry to do that.
Yep. So much of what we're talking about here is a cultural mind shift. So much of what you're emphasizing here, really rebranding and retelling the story and the historical barriers that we have in this country around this. I want to shift gears a little bit into youth apprenticeship in particular. In Germany, the average age, or I'm sorry, in the US, the average age for apprenticeships is 29. In Germany, that's closer to 16, and I want to get your thoughts on what we need to do here to make the appeal to students and to their parents and other influencers in that decision.
Well, first and foremost, recognize that we are in fact making progress, because the average age used to be in the high 30s. So in a relatively short period of time, we are shifting that, and I think a lot of that has to do with this early work that we're seeing done. Having said that, the cultural education mindset that I've tried to describe, and you have to talk about it, otherwise you're never going to change it, is in part due to that. So we have to continue the process of pushing that. I think there is a European model that existed and was not dismantled in the post-World War II environment. We dismantled it in our country, and that's why we have this age gap compared to the European model. But I think well, let me say this, that I think your foundation's commitment to STEM education is very important, because we are going to attract more young women, girls and grammar school, middle school, young women in high school and on the college level to want to be involved in more and more of these fields that were formerly thought to be primarily the men's domain. And that will give us an opportunity to have more women in internships, because if you look at what we've largely done until the last 10 or 12 years, is these were almost exclusively the domain of men. So I think we have a much larger audience of people to potentially appeal to if we're active in trying to appeal to them, and if we rebuild these systems in our states, and if we're right in returning to a different mindset in the educative process, we can make even more progress. And I think we could make it relatively quickly. I mean, we had one advanced manufacturing center. Now we have 7. We had practically none of our private universities participating with us. Now most of our private universities have some sort of program related to advanced manufacturing.
Yeah, that's great. I love the reminder, by the way, for all of us that the average age for apprenticeships has come down and that there is momentum here. I think we're out there working day in and day out, and we wish things would be coming along faster. But it's good to step back, and that's why this conference has been so wonderful for me the last 24 hours or so, is to really understand what's happening in this country, that this work is taking hold, and that things are changing. We have time for one last question, so I'm going to invite you to freeform on it a little bit too, to the extent there are things that you wish you've had a chance to say but haven't yet. But I want to ask you about the pairing of a model of apprenticeships that is almost by definition required to be demand-driven. The jobs have to be there if they're going to be successful, following the training. Help us understand how you do that pairing in Connecticut, how you work with employers to make sure that you're getting the right folks matched to the right jobs so that they're there upon completion.
The great thing about turning to our private sector partners are that as you do that, they become much more excited and involved in the process. I think part of the problem in the United States is the corporate community, particularly, not necessarily the biggest companies, but the supply chain basically gave up on government in this particular area and didn't believe that government was capable of changing direction. As you show the ability within a state, within a city, or within a nation to change that direction, I think you're inviting more participation. And what we found by setting up workplace boards and having a statewide council address this issue, a copy of the report, which I have with me and read every update on, is the more you're having these meetings and these discussions, more people will come to the table, more people will create internships and apprenticeships because they actually believe that you want to be their partner. When the state's willing to spend $10 an hour for up to 180 days for you to train someone in an apprenticeship program in a particular area in your company, using your dollars, because you're not going to get a lot of people that you want to train for simply $10. But when we're underwriting that expense so that you can accommodate and build your company, your supply chain company, to meet the needs of a Pratt & Whitney, which has 8,000 back orders on their latest commercial engine, or to meet the needs of Electric Boat that has the needs of 9,000 to 11,000 people in the coming years in Rhode Island and Connecticut, or to meet the needs of a Sikorsky, and these are all manufacturers, that has a whole new helicopter line that will be constructed in Connecticut, or the needs of the financial services, in our case, / insurance industry and related industries. Success breeds success. Discussion breeds knowledge. We need to have discussions. We need to build the knowledge base. We need to show that we can have successes, that government, both local, state, and federal, are prepared actually not to be partners by word, but partners by action. And action is putting some money and some skin into the game.
Yep. Wonderful, Governor. Thank you. It has been my distinct pleasure to spend some time with you. I think I can speak for the room in sharing our thanks. So would you join me in thanking the Governor?
Thank you. We got to get out of here, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.